I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the Abnormalities lore video, specifically the abnormality lore of the Abnormalities in Season 3. The abnormalities encountered on the Great Lake certainly demonstrated one thing: that they were immune to the palladification of the pallid whale, and were likely immune to the process of the other whales that would normally turn what is consumed by them into mermaids. As for the specifics of the abnormalities, let's go over the lore of them, as well, that's kind of the point of this video, isn't it? Let us start with the Ambling Pearl. This is a WA-level abnormality that the Damned Dozen needed to fight near the start of their journey from Pigwad Town to the heart of the pallid whale, while they were inside it. With Queequeg at the helm of the ship that they were using, so they needed to fight this abnormality off. It had the appearance of a giant clam with a green shell, and had multi-jointed metallic-looking limbs. It had numerous eyes, where they could be seen when the shell opened, all of these eyes lining the inner edges of the shell's valves. It generated a green slime within it that was poisonous, which spilled out as it moved. A single pearl was inside it. That slime also contained larvae. The shell itself was extremely durable. It could take a lot of punishments, requiring that enough green slime be removed. Then the shell could be opened, and the pearl could be attacked. This was the weak spot of this abnormality, one that was much more vulnerable to attack. The environment where it was fought, when fought in the Mirror Dungeon, was similar to that of the mudflats that existed within the backstreets of District 21. A polluted, scrap-filled wasteland, tauntingly close to the pristine beach nearby, separated by a barrier that shredded anything that touched it. As for the combat side of this, it doesn't matter what kind of damage or sin affinity is used on this one, as the damage will remain the same. This abnormality relies on poison, which can be used to lower defense by the amount of poison on the target. And if hit by certain attacks, as in the Damned Dozen getting hit, paralysis can be caused on them, and its larva can infest those that get hit by them, which can lower the SP of those that have them. The green slime can also attack, but they can also be consumed by the abnormality to regain HP when using the devouring fluid attack. It's greatly slowed down at that point. As for when its core HP is at 10%, the attack pattern will change, and while the shell retains its resistances even when staggered, the pearl is exposed, and this is the weak spot. And if it manages to eat the green slime, an event occurs, where if it's looked closely at, a gem of sorts was seen. Something born after a long, long time of waiting, born in the ebb and flow of the filth, and fills it, and leaves it with its every movement. To remove it is to take its reason for existing. It might fall apart, so someone would need to take it away. If the check was, if it was passed, then the Chosen would reach out for it despite the acidic burning sensation and the writhing lava, which unnerved the Chosen. The gem was claimed, and this made the abnormality roar, and quickly regenerated something new. The Chosen would take 30 SP damage and 20 HP damage, while the abnormality would lose 3 green slime. If the check fails, then they'd feel the same, and they'd try to rummage through all of that in the available light, but their patience and perseverance ran out, and had to stop. It left nothing but wounds for both, and the Chosen lost 20 SP and 40 HP. Yeah, the best way to fight this is to defend against its attacks, clear the green slime, don't let it eat it, and when the pearl is exposed, attack it. This abnormality report was written by Emile Sinclair, who compared the ambling pearl that resembled a green clam to the trash crabs, due to the green slime and the ocean smell. It even looked and acted like a clam, due to the shell that was shut tight. Although he knew that clams didn't have arms and legs, and they were not as big as the abnormality. They decided to wait and observe it before attacking. The shell would open up. Then it gurgled bubbling green liquid, which spills out of it, and they saw some lava-like things, and then something wet was found on the page. Heathcliff asked where Sinclair went, without finishing the log. Yi-Sang witnessed him leaving in a hurry to the deck, due to him feeling like vomiting. This disgusted Heathcliff. Faust noted that it was perspiration that he was suffering from. He was not vomiting. So the record was still cleaner than he thought. Rodier, nevertheless, didn't need to know this. After a little while fighting it, Sinclair noted how durable the shell was. They could pummel it for as long as they wanted, and it wouldn't break. Like their attacks were doing nothing. So it's like attacking Virgilius with a feather duster, which would have no effect whatsoever, not unless he was allergic to what that tool was made from. So he tried something. He used his halberd's reach to try and wedge the clam's shell, and tried to twist it open by pressing it down, remembering that from school, like a counterweight on a lever, which didn't work. All it did was break his halberd in half, but he did learn something from that. When the shell was shut, the green slime gathered around it to make sure that it would remain that way, as long as it wanted to. He couldn't open it while this was there, but he could remove the green slime, which would likely help to open it up and attack its softer parts. Otis asks why he left that out. Specifically, why he left out the parts where he flailed wildly with the broken pieces of his halberd. Sinclair asked how that was relevant. Massot saw it as quite relevant, where despite his less than productive efforts at drawing its attention, the larvae instead attacked allies in a better state than he was. Massot, has anyone delivered a swift blow to your genitals for what you just said? Because I'm amazed that Sinclair wasn't even tempted to do so with you. You've seen what happens when he's pushed too far. Val saw this as meaningful, yet she saw the meaningless struggle with an ineffective weapon as something that he could have put in the report as well. Rodier was frustrated by both of their feedback. After more time fighting it, the ambling pearl revealed its pearl, or at least something that generated an odd twinkling light inside the bubbling toxin, seeing it as the core of the abnormality. Also seeing it as a shame that they had to suffer so much before getting a chance to attack it. Starting to understand now, or at least just grown used to it. They've had to get killed to solve anything. Yes, I wouldn't call that a sacrifice, as sacrifice implies giving up the value, not the worthless. Gregor was glad that he learned something new, although he suggested that they didn't stand around when in an emergency situation. Heathcliff told him not to soften it for him. They all died because they were busy celebrating, going, "I did it!" after getting the shell open. Sinclair apologised for that. Next we have the Skin Prophet. This TEF level abnormality is an aberration of the TEF level tool abnormality Skin Prophecy. Now, the Skin Prophecy was a tool abnormality where it would grant extra prudence, as in what governed what is now SP, but makes them more vulnerable to white damage, or damage that affects the target purely on a psychological level. And if they go insane, while affected by this, they'll be dragged into a hell of flesh and blood by arms coming from the ground. The other side of which likely resembles the abnormality environment when fighting it in the mirror dungeon. It appeared as some kind of demon obsessed with its book, where it appeared as if it's writing the Skin Prophecy. It was a skinless entity with 3 heads, each with a single glowing eye. The body was bony, the spine elongated between its ribcage and waist, kneeling in place with its thin and frail legs, holding a book that it writes in with a glowing fiery quill pen, grasped by a twig-like arm that came from its chest, the quill pen being its Ichio gift. It was encountered on the Damned Dozen's journey to the heart, encountering it near the weak sinew bridge that Queequeg warned wasn't safe, disobeying Ahab's orders. This one was an interesting one when it comes to fighting it, as it prioritized those that were marked by one of its attacks. Well, those attacks that do mark them as marks, where it causes SP damage by the number of lit candles, although it primarily burns its enemies, which can sometimes inflict Wrath Fragility, making Wrath affinity attacks even more damaging. It also has an attack that can snuff out all candles. There are also some unclashable attacks that can only be defended by the target. If the candles aren't all lit, it will counterattack. If attacks, if its candles were all lit by attacking, then it will attack directly and the candles will counterattack the following turn. It will also lose its resistances until they're all snuffed out. Now, slash-based attacks are what it's most vulnerable to, along with Gloom Affinity, although Sloth and Pride Affinity can also cause more damage than most. Just not as much. Otis wrote this post-mortem report, as she put it, as ordered by Dante. They encountered it around 1600 hours. Yeah, Otis has a means of measuring time on her, so that's how she's able to know the approximate time that they fought it. She certainly has a watch. They failed to immediately recognize it due to the low light environment. The first real encounter was around 1610 hours. Also mentioning that it was encountered closer to that on the same day that they were eaten by the pallid whale. It was positioned next to candles, furiously writing something down on a large book, with a flaming quill pen in its hands. It was trouble recognizing it as, well, it was quite dark without the candles being lit, asking how it managed to write in the dark, or how it continued to write. But the three glowing eyes in the flaming quill pen were suspected to act as reading lamps. She sees it as also being able to show its attack patterns using light, recommending not to go on the attack until they observe its behaviours and make sense of it, advising that they take this into account when coming up with commands. Heathcliff asks how long are they going to not go on the attack? Faust determined, yes, she determined that attacking it before lighting the candles was a fruitless effort, seeing that well, Heathcliff saw their long standby as meaningless. Otis told them that misjudgments are common occurrences in battle. She took responsibility for her mistakes when taking the candles' attacks. Yeah, we all have our bad days. Later on in the battle, Otis saw that the battle progressed differently than she initially expected. Understanding that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, they engaged it in a meaningful capacity around 22:15 hours that day. Oh, so they waited a few hours before trying again? How long did they keep Ahab waiting? She saw the strategy as simply, well, it announced its attack in an obvious way. After some time, or after they lit all the candles, it would recognize that it was under attack and it would attack them directly, giving them enough time to come up with a strategy before it attacks them. There are a number of ways to fight this, but due to their numerical advantage and the candles were rendered non-aggressive, they just needed to not let their guards down. If it's successful against one of them in a contest of strength, due to incompetence, it can attack in a wide range to strike all at once. The candles will die down eventually, so they need to be kept track of in battle. Then she added to her reports that she devised a plan to minimize losses against the enemy, which would mean less pain for Dante. It only recognized that they were there when the candles were lit, snuff out all the candles before the attack against it was prepared, and it won't notice and it'll give them more time to plan out. And this proved quite effective. When the candles weren't lit, it couldn't attack them, where it was more likely to attack itself. As for the book, it wasn't a normal book, where a single glimpse of it was enough to cause headaches and confusion for those that read it. So it was writing a political autobiography then. I doubt I could make it past page 1 of those, not without being bored out of my mind and going unconscious. Then we have the dream-devouring silk current. This war-level abnormality is an aberration of the war-level abnormality dreaming current. The dreaming current was a sick child that was experimented on In an attempt to save his life, they attempted to prolong his lifespan by feeding that child grape-flavoured medication, which had hallucinogenic properties. Eventually, he changed into a shark-like entity, due to either his experiences or the love of the ocean that the hallucinogenics encouraged. The aberration was likely made under similar circumstances and conditions, except in this case, based on it being similar to a giant abyssal fish with many cracked fluorescent turquoise LED light tubes sticking out of the back. Their experience likely involved LED lights and lower light overall in that room. The dark exterior had fluorescent parts on it. A mouth was on it that was 2/3 of the length of it, and a second mouth was immediately below the first, although it didn't show this unless suffering damage. It also appears to have control over water, able to make its environment become an underwater one, although it can swim on solid surfaces, or even in it. Thankfully, the light tubes prevent itself and those near them from drowning, as it allows them to breathe underwater. This one is based on those bioluminescent sea creatures found in the deep ocean, where the light of the sun can't reach. It also likely represents a fear of the ocean, quite fitting considering the traumas that Ishmael suffered. This was encountered in the final corridor between the Damned Dozen and the Hearts, while Captain Ahab, Starbuck, and Pip enjoyed the show. Now, in combat, it causes sinking upon hitting its enemy, which lowers SP when sinking is triggered. Even more so if the target has a fluorescent shard, which also grants its enemy 3 poise and 2 poise counts. There's also one attack that causes damage to the fluorescent parts if it loses, and if it loses 3 times, it's staggered. Although it can also deal SP damage by sinking count times potency, then it's removed. And if the SP is around -45, then the rest of the SP damage is dealt as gloom damage. This is the sinking deluge. It can also target Flotsam, which causes damage to the fluorescent part and grants it blind obsession once it's broken. The fluorescent shard is inflicted on all its enemies, although this is regenerated after 2 turns, and it gains 8 poise if the fluorescent part isn't broken. Although from turn 2, it can grant all enemies 2 paralysis and 2 damage down. In fact, any identities without the fluorescent shard are inflicted with 1 bind and 1 paralyze, and each loses 3 SP. Now, this one is weakest to pride and envy damage, and blunt damage is best avoided as it's resistant to this. Now, this report was written by that blonde lunatic herself, Don Quixote, seeing this pelagic creature as levitating over the ground, as if there was water, where there was none. The back was riddled with lengthy incandescent fluorescent lights. She was unsure of their purpose. She then saw the glowing and dimming tubes as like pretty trinkets. She wanted to grow near and pet it, but the others held her back, seeing this action as more insane than her usual ones. then she had a chance to do so. The records after that were indecipherable, as though they were soaked in water before the ink had a chance to dry. Faust noted that she was assigned the task of recording the larger abnormalities to prevent similar occurrences, such as this one. To avoid the, similar problems with the head chickens, yet this happens. So this will be a hazard regardless of the abnormality size. Faust, this is a distortion you're talking about, a part of one, not an abnormality. Well, even you have your bad days. Yisang requested that she tell them which of them was chosen to write the report before their first encounters with the abnormalities. Dante then told them that it's the first time that they were experiencing the sensation of drowning 12 times at the same time, asking them not to make this a repeat occurrence. Later on, they fought it. Not long after, it immediately flooded the area, submerging itself and them. This made Don Quixote feel guilty due to the mistake that she made, due to her impatience. Apparently she had to... Then she figured out what the fluorescent lights did. They allowed them to breathe underwater. She didn't know why. They were prone to breaking. Yes, I know, not sure why a tool for breathing was so brittle. So, if it made them able to breathe underwater, she decided to share the lights among them. It even works by breaking it into shards and sharing them among the others. One of the rare occurrences that she came up with an idea that not only works, but made sense. As the battle progressed, she continued her advice, as once they were able to breathe, they were better able to fight the abnormality, and it was much easier. Yes, there was still more to this. The lights that came from the abnormality were sharp. It largely body-slammed them as it attacked. She then came up with her second good idea. Break the lights into sharp, pointy pieces and lure it towards them. Place the broken lights between them and the abnormality. And, it would cause damage to it, and Woot is calling this a barricade, an often used strategy. And yes, I know, I am translating from her usual speech into a speech that, most normal people would use. Now for the abnormalities of the mirror clock. That's refraction line 3. Where during the fight through the third refraction line, a mix of the old and the new was fought, including abnormalities that have yet to be fought. It was a taxing trial, but the damned dozen would need to do something while they were waiting to get to their destination on the mainland. Let's start this bit off with the drenched gossypium. Now this 10th level abnormality, it might possibly be an aberration of the H level abnormality porcupus, a similar but different plant-like abnormality. While porcupus was basically a walking opium poppy that got those that pricks their thorns on themselves to get so high their heads exploded as if they'd received a shotgun at point-blank range, and out of their necks came blood fountains straight out of Kill Bill Volume 1. The drenched gossypium fed on blood and desired to make its victims bleed more. It's a white flower that can move on its own. Its beauty is deceptive, and the best way of dealing with this is aggressively cutting it down to size. How, you may ask? Well, that will be explained next. It focuses on inflicting bleed, and with its piercing attacks, some of which are unclashable, it's well equipped to do so. It can also heal based on the amount of bleed on the targets. And the amount of bleeds that can be inflicted, well, it depends on the amount of Gossipium on the targets. Or if it's in its red-stained Gossipium state, which it stays in if the core of the abnormality is below 20% maximum HP. The one with the most bleed will receive a strong attack, as its base power will be 5 more if that's the case. And it can cause lust fragility with one of its attacks. It can also bind its enemies by 1 with a specific attack, and if they have Gossipium and if any of them are staggered, then like with its EGO gift that's available in the Mirror Dungeon, they'll unstagger, and bleed will be inflicted based on the stagger level times 8. They'll also have 2 less attack power next turn. And then when the body of the abnormality is broken, then Gossipium for all combatants will be halved. And the best things to use against this one are slash damage along with wrath and pride affinity. Blunt damage along with lust and gluttony sin affinity is best avoided as it's resistant to these. The best way of dealing with this is to pile on the damage when they're unclashable attacks, especially when dodging isn't an option. Largely if the target doesn't have that defense capability. When the red-stained Gossipium wears off, an event occurs where more and more vines puncture the sinners, continuing to drain blood from them, and the red patch on the white cotton pass of the Gossipium grows. One will step forth to do something about this, and if successful, then it's determined that they can't be torn or cut, but it can be pulled out. While it's fighting the others, the Chosen pulls out the vines. Their muscles were worn and bleeding, but it didn't feed the abnormality. Yes, because the vines draining the blood were removed. All would lose Gossipium status, heal 10 SP, and the Chosen would gain 2 haste the next turn. And if this failed, then the Gossipium would know what they were about to do and latch onto the Chosen's arm and dig under the skin. The Chosen would gain 3 Gossipium along with receiving 10 SP damage and 20 HP damage. This report was written by Heathcliff. He vented about that before he got to the report proper, asking where those good-for-nothing cotton-head Gossipium came from, keeping his expectations low regarding abnormalities being helpful, asking if what was given to them was supposed to be gifts, not getting why the gift from that one helps their enemies keep their balance regardless of the circumstances, feeling that they're taking the yes, the EGO gift that prevents enemies from remaining staggered in the next turn, but at the cost of receiving bleed proportionate to the stagger level. As for the report proper, he described it as looking like a tree with a massive cotton bundle on it. Not that different from last time they ran into it in the Mirror Dungeon. Same, different day. Its center was sucking up blood instead of water. On its sides it's got wriggling stems, roots. It's creepy to him, whatever they are. Seeing that the vines are there to poke holes in them, like they're straws, and suck the blood out of their veins, wanting to tear them to shreds before they do that. Yeah, If you need a plan that requires brute force and a lack of subtlety, he's the man to call on. Anything else, he can off. He found out later on in that fight that the vines couldn't be cut. He wanted to ask something, but he stopped himself. He questioned if it was possible to cut them. And there's no way of avoiding getting punctured by the annoying vines. Well, not without a successful invasion. He observed that it turned red after it sucked enough out of them. After that, he could use a powerful attack against them, understanding that it needed to be finished off before that happened, even though it's easier said than done. The straws couldn't be pulled off them once they hit them, so he decided that they needed to beat it into submission like fluffing the cotton out of a pillow. Yeah, fluffing the cotton inside a pillow to be more precise, asking what option they had. Well, with the absence of a sane option that had any chance of working, that's what they did. Heathcliff then spoke of his understanding of botany, seeing plants with deep roots and a good supply of water grow to be resilient. Remembering that Faust said that the same rules don't apply to abnormalities, yet it applies here, he figured it out and he attacked those that had the most straws in them. He can speak from personal experience with this. Then he noted that it gave gifts that stopped the enemy getting staggered. But the pommeling gets that muppet staggered without any difficulty, understanding that it needs to be killed when this chance appears. Failing to do so, well, it's unlikely that they'll get a second chance to do so. He believed that it preferred his blood as it kept jabbing him with its vines. Next we have the Ardor Blossom Moth. This level abnormality is where the Ardor Blossom Star EGO that Ishmael is able to use comes from. A burning moth that clearly is not a rip-off of Volcarona from the Pokemon series. Now, I've heard of the expression moth to the flame, but who said to take it literally to the point where it's an insectoid equivalent of the Human Torch? As I said in the Mirror Dungeon Encounter lore video, this might be a reference to Irish butterfly magic associated with the fire of the gods and protective rituals, specifically the protection of livestock. It was also believed to be the souls of the departed passing on or visiting the material plane. For some reason, I'm hearing Disco Inferno in my head. As for what to do when fighting it, this one is big on burning. Much like the Skin Prophets. But unlike the Skin Prophets, this isn't one where you need to alternate between lighting the candles and attacking the abnormality. This one is weaker when it's targeting the wings. Yes, this weakens it. It focuses on piling on the burn and even inflicting rough resistance reduction. Its Ardor Blossom Star attack can cause a lot of burn if allowed to do so it's best to have a hard-hitting EGO for that. Even its evasion can burn. And it has an unclashable skill that does no damage but burns all. It also gathers embers for inflicting it on others when its wings break. As for what to use on it, anything but pierce, wrath, lust and envy. Although sloth and gloom can cause more damage. After enough damage is sustained on the abnormality, a dark shadow. Yes, a dark shadow would linger amidst the licking tongues of the crimson flame. At the centre of the flaming moth, a vague and mercurial form, yet the shadow was at the very core of it. They could reach out to the shadow, separating it from the flames to momentarily cause the heat to subside. If the check passed, then the Chosen would reach out towards the flames, enduring the fire, their fingertips blistering and bubbling, but the passion that they had burned hotter. And before the moth could react, the shadow was pulled out. The fire and the embers on both the moth and the sinners would subside. Yes, indeed, all would lose burn, and the Ardor Blossom Moth would lose 2 ember. If this check fails, then the blistering and bubbling would be too much and the Chosen would pull away. The price of this failure would be devastating. It would beat its wings faster, and the flames would burn brighter. A world of fire would descend on them, and this would result in the burn and burn counts adding up on all of them, and then it would be divided by the number of sinners still around, and this amount would be inflicted on them all. Yi Sang wrote the report on this abnormality. He would try to describe his impressions of the encounter, seeing it as having the appearance of a moth set aflame, the flame itself taking the form of an insect. It was surrounded by a crowd of red, fiery sparks. It reminded him of his youth in District 19. He collected twigs only to set them ablaze to watch as the fire consumed them. The same embers that disappeared into the night sky were observed on the abnormality. Watching that little bonfire, watching the twigs turn into bright red lanterns, then the black soot. He couldn't help appreciate its warmth, asking if many shared his sentiments. They need not touch the fire to know that it blistered their skin and burned their bones, yet the heat was still yearned for, to grow nearer to it. He desired that much as the blaze danced and flickered gently before them. Then Heathcliff said that his fancy speech didn't explain why he decided to stroll right under its nose and burn himself to a crisp. Faust noted that they've gathered a piece of useful intelligence from his death. The embers that Yi Sang brought back could spread to others under certain circumstances. Then Heathcliff told her that it spread right onto her and burned her skin. Most people he knows would have a little more intense reaction to getting burned alive. Faust confirmed that, but the pain was relatively manageable. Yeah. I suspect something especially terrible happened to her to have that mild a reaction. Later on in the battle, Yi Sang had an opportunity to engage it in combat. Based on his last approach, the embers may latch onto their bodies and spread to others under particular circumstances. As Faust said earlier, it was gained purely by chance, and while he admitted this was due to his carelessness, which he apologized for, allowing its wings to touch them, it would impart embers onto them. Its strength grew as it gained embers. Break the wings and they can take the offensive. The embers don't burn, they bring warmth, accepting their benefits. But he didn't let that distract him from observing burns on the others. After more fighting, he figured out the method that the embers spark. To awaken the dying embers, to revive the flames, it must be fanned until it rises. It flutters its wings with enough strength to create a gust of wind. This would cause the embers to explode in size and assault them, as the unrelenting gusts summon itself in that instance, which makes it appear like a ball of flame, which spreads the embers upon them and makes the flame grow greater and ignite, making them burn. The strength of the abnormality increases with the embers. It can be embraced, but the gusts can overwhelm them, and it can be devastating. The last of the new abnormalities encountered in the mirror clock refraction line is the Spiral of Contempt. This level abnormality is a spiraling mass of gold and metal tendrils that bleeds from above. It confronts those with utter contempt, hating those that dare to gaze on it. The embodiment of both hatred and contempt, seeking to draw those emotions out of those that are looking at it. It's possible that this could be an aberration of the level abnormality Schadenfreude, a metal box with an eye that hates people looking at it and will kill them with circular saws if they do so. Virgilius, the red gaze, had to suppress that. Sadly, it killed most of the children that had been turned into Pecatulum. The children from the orphanage that survived Tomeri and Iori the Purple Tear before that happened. Yes. Both would not tolerate anyone looking at it. The main difference being that Schadenfreude was limited to the ground, while the Spiral of Contempt was not so restricted. Okay, and as far as fighting it is concerned, this is another puzzle boss, although in this case the main hazards of this one are a mix of bleed and fragile. It can also debuff offense and defense, along with increasing its damage. In fact, there's one attack that can even reduce SP. It can also reduce SP upon a successful evasion. And when its hands are attacked, those that do so receive the gaze status, which increases the damage that those with it can deal. And whoever has contempt will lose EGO resources depending on the skill affinity. And this can cause 3 damage down at the end of the turn. And then there's what happens when it's below 30% maximum HP. Where gaze and contempt are removed from all, and all will receive all beholding gaze, which takes 4 times the value of fixed HP and SP damage. It's also weak to status ailments, where it grows less durable with every 10 burn, bleed, tremor, rupture, or sinking. It also gains 1 pride fragility for each critical hit, and when hit by a skill that consumes 8 or more charge. It gains 1 envy fragility, so if you're big on inflicting a status ailment, or on gathering poise, then you'll certainly do well with this one. Well, with the charge status, I'm thinking Ryushu would be good with this, along with Reindeer Ishmael. As for what to use against it, as far as raw damage is concerned, I don't think it matters that much, as all damage types and sin affinities will do the same. And the best way of defeating this one, though, is to deliberately have one of the combatants get grasped, as in fail the grasping attack, and then after one of them is out of the battle for the next 3 turns at most, use multi-targeting EGO or attacks to break the sinner free. Then an event will occur, where it involves a piercing gaze that sees right through them. The chosen makes a specific gaze keenly, and if the check is successful, then either slash, piercing, or blunt will be the damage type it's weak to. Where failing the check, will cause the chosen to receive 30 HP and 30 SP damage. Then the intense gaze will transform into a gaze of different sensations: burning wrath, wounding lust, beholding sloth, devouring gluttony, beglooming gloom, scornful pride, and envy. If the check is passed, then that sin affinity will be its weakness. Failing, on the other hand, will cause the chosen to receive 30 HP and 30 SP damage, along with receiving 2 offense level down. Yes, this will make the fight much easier, especially when it goes below 30% maximum HP. Yes, the all-beholding gaze that's inflicted on them, attacking their SP, that's EGO corruption just waiting to happen. Radia wrote the report on the Spiral of Contempt, and this reminded her of District 25, specifically her hometown there, which irked her. And not about that place. A place that was loosely based on pre-Bolshevik Russia. What irked her was not going without a meal. It wasn't begging and pleading just to borrow money. She'd never minded that, and it only took a moment to put that behind her. What got to her was the look of contempt, like she's beneath them. She never fully got over that, or grew out of that. She thought that she'd learn to endure it, to ignore it, and move on. At least until she encountered that abnormality. It didn't look like a person. She started to describe that floaty thing. It had an oddly demeaning gaze. It got to her for a reason that eluded her. She saw it as a weird, squiggly, artsy-fartsy looking. It made an oddly metallic noise as well, looking like it was made of gold, suggesting that they scrap it and sell its pieces so they can grab themselves tons of gourmet beef for a barbecue party. Typical Roger, always thinking of your stomach, which is also a Hindu's nightmare. Yes, I know, bad karma, man. Then Yisang wanted to know if she's always thinking of her stomach. Heathcliff then told him that he spent most of his life hungry, telling him that rich kids with full bellies and nice homes wouldn't understand. Rodia understood. Beef always tasted good, hungry or not, even though she's never been hungry before she joined Limbus Company. Heathcliff told her that's not what he... and then he got the joke. A little later, she admitted that this wasn't going to be easy. She was right about its look of contempt. It glared at the one that attacked it the most, before suddenly switching to a different kind of look. A look that roughly translated to, "Worthless wretch, your worth is not enough to even lay a finger on me." At least that was the impression that she had. Sometimes a huge pair of hands would just burst out of the ground and snatch one of them away. Massault got snatched last time. They didn't know what to do. It just squeezed him into it and left nothing but what looks like crushed tomato puree, which in the back streets of District 23 they would call pasta sauce. Ugh. It was awful to her, and to be honest, I don't know why I keep bringing that place up! Where the only way to free those in that state before that happens is to attack the hand until it breaks, advising that if it gets her, to prioritise breaking its grip. She'd prefer not to get Panini pressed to death. Oh, so they have paninis even in that hole. A little later, she thought about it. The grabby palm attack, and its gaze was full of contempt. It was related. They don't randomly grab anyone. Considering the logic and the pattern, there's a specific window where it grabs them. If they attack its hands, she mistook it for plucking them one by one as if they're weeds, going for the most annoying of them. Even if they're, well, that makes total sense. Then again, common sense doesn't apply here, although they can use its palms to their advantage. When they managed to free one of those captured in this way, this caught it off guard. Those seen as lowly wretches that broke its grasp and freed their friend, this dazed it and it really hurt it. This required the gaze to fall on all of them for it to work, although she hoped that Dante's head didn't explode working this mess out. Although she was joking about that. Otis then told her that her intentions might not be hostile, but she saw it as inappropriate to ridicule Dante. Dante didn't see this as anything new. If she wanted to tackle every instance of them making fun of them, she'd be lecturing Heathcliff all week. Otis then told Dante that she gave him a fair share of warnings every time she got the chance. Dante told her that they're okay with that, so there's no need. Then we see that Heathcliff was reading this and realised why Otis, the resident stick up the side at him earlier.